Everyone, and welcome to today's video. Up until this point, we have mapped out the static physical anatomy of our brain cells. We met the neurons and we looked at the glial cells keeping them alive. But right now, we are going to answer the ultimate question. How does a collection of static cells actually come alive to create an active thought? The answer is a high-speed chain reaction that forces your brain cells to convert raw electricity into chemical data, and that entire system begins with a high voltage phenomenon called the action potential. To understand how this electrical spark forms, think of every quiet neuron like a fully charged household battery. It builds up electrical power by separating two simple chemical ingredients, sodium and potassium. When the cell is resting, it locks almost all the positive sodium outside its walls, while keeping the potassium tucked inside. Because of how they are separated, the inside of the cell holds a negative electrical charge. But the moment a thought triggers the neuron, microscopic gates along the cell wall snap wide open. This causes the positive sodium outside to violently rush inside the cell. This sudden inward flood completely flips the electrical charge from negative to positive. However, to prevent the line from short-circuiting, the cell has to reset itself instantly. 1 millisecond later, the sodium gate slams shut and the potassium gate open. This forces the positive potassium inside to flush out of the cell. As that positive charge leaves, the neuron drops right back down into its quiet negative state. This entire process acts like a falling row of dominoes or cards. The sudden electrical flip forces the next set of gates down the line to snap open, sending a high-speed wave of electricity racing down the Exxon cable. A strict rule governing this process is the all or nothing law. Detailed on our yellow card, neurons cannot fire a weak or strong electrical spark. It operates exactly like a light switch or a gun trigger. If you stimulate the cell enough to cross the starting line, it fires at 100% max power down the cable. If you fall even a fraction short, it stays completely at rest. But what happens when this electrical wave reaches the very end of the line? That brings us to our next slide, the synaptic gap. So, once that electrical wave races down the Exxon cable and hits the very end of the line, it slams directly into a massive biological roadblock. As we learned from the historical work of Kajal, our brain cells do not physically touch. Instead, they are completely separated by a microscopic fluid filled canyon known as the synaptic gap. Because raw electricity is completely trapped inside the cell membrane, it cannot physically leap across this open space. To get the message across, the neuron must instantly shift its communication strategy, converting the signal from a rapid electrical spark into chemical packets. When the electrical action potential arrives at the terminal, the shear voltage forces tiny storage bubbles inside the cell to rush forward and dump their contents directly into the open canyon. These contents are chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. As outlined on our right card, once these chemicals are inside the gap, they operate under a strict lock and key mechanism. The chemical keys float across the fluid of the canyon and hunt for highly specific matching protein docking points on the next neuron. When enough of the right chemical keys slide into those receptor locks, it acts as a trigger, instantly sparking a brand new electrical wave inside the next cell and successfully passing the data forward down the circuit. The brain uses a high-speed cleanup process called reuptake. The sending cell deploys specialized proteins that act like miniature biological vacuum cleaners. They suck the leftover chemicals out of the open gap and bring them back inside the cell to be recycled for the next message. This entire sequence, which is the electrical conversion, the chemical crossing, and the vacuum cleanup, takes place in less than a fraction of a single millisecond. Now, let's talk about our first major chemical messenger, dopamine. Dopamine is fundamentally the neurotransmitter of anticipation, focus, and physical motivation. When neuroscientists track cellular signaling, they observe that dopamine levels do not spike when a subject experiences a rewarding stimulus. Instead, the chemical surges in anticipation of the reward. It acts as a biological engine, generating the physical drive, focus, and energy required to pursue a target. Beyond mental drive, dopamine is also completely necessary for controlling your physical movements. Think of it like a chemical lubricant for your brain's motion control center. When dopamine levels drop too low in these physical pathways, your brain can no longer smoothly steer your muscles. This directly causes physical movement failures, leading to severe body stiffness and uncontrollable shaking tremors. Furthermore, this chemical is the primary mechanism behind behavioral addiction, governed by a calculation called the reward prediction error law. When you experience a completely unexpected reward, your brain releases a massive wave of dopamine. This chemical surge burns that specific action into your physical hardware as a mandatory survival habit. This exact biological loop is what modern tech companies explicitly target. By utilizing variable reward structures like notifications that pop up at random intervals, apps systematically hijacking your dopamine circuits to lock you into a continuous state of tracking and scrolling. Our final major chemical messenger is serotonin. While dopamine acts like an accelerator pedal driving you forward to pursue rewards, serotonin works as your brain's ultimate internal brake and stabilizer. It is the primary chemical responsible for keeping your emotions balanced, calm, and satisfied. When your serotonin pathways are working optimally, they signal a state of safety to your system. This chemical baseline active suppresses your brain's survival alarms, keeping anxiety and panic at bay. Beyond balancing your emotions, serotonin is absolutely critical for managing your biological cycles. As you can see on our right card, your brain actively takes serotonin molecules and uses them as building block to create melatonin, the exact hormone that tells your body when to sleep and controls your biological clock. When people suffer from a severe lack of serotonin, it directly leads to chronic insomnia, emotional volatility, and severe mood disorders. With our chemical mapping complete, we now understand how neurons use both electrical action potentials and chemical neurotransmitters to pass information across the network. In our next video, we will dissect the 4 physical lobes of the human skull and look at their specialized computational duties. So, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash that like button if you learned something new today, and I'll see you on the next video.